What's up, fellas? In today's video, we're going to be talking about Damian Lillard because I think one of the biggest, pieces of news from yesterday was that not only the All-Star starters were announced, but that Damian Lillard was not one of them. I did not have him as an All-Star starter in my All-Star selection video from yesterday, to a lot of people's surprise. And in this video, I'm going to be explaining why he wasn't an All-Star starter. There's a whole conversation around this, and I know that Damian Lillard fans can get very upset about this kind of stuff, so we're just going to kind of talk it out and show exactly why Steph and Luka made it over him in the backcourt in the Western Conference. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every single day on this channel, so it's the most consistent NBA content on YouTube. So if you're new here, what's up? My name is Tucker. Consider subscribing to the channel. If you like the video, you can leave a like rating on it, and you can also check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen and a link tree down in the description below. With all those things said, let's go ahead and get started and talk about Damian Lillard. So in both of yesterday's videos, I upset some people, that are Damian Lillard fans. I didn't include him as an All-Star starter. I did have him on the team, of course, in the West. And I also didn't have him in my MVP video yesterday. I named 5 different players that I felt like one of those 5 was going to win the MVP, and it was Steph, LeBron, Embiid, Jokic, and Durant. And obviously Damian Lillard is not among that list. So in this video, we're going to talk about exactly why I think Damian Lillard was not named as an All-Star starter. And let's just go and get this part out of the way. It's no disrespect meant to Damian Lillard in either of those videos yesterday. And it's very, very, very close. I mean, the conversation here is between him and Luka. Steph was number 1 in the Western Conference backcourt in fan voting, in media voting, in player voting. So he was always going to be a starter. And Luka and Dame were pretty much tied in terms of those 3 categories, excuse me. I think Luka just got a bit of an edge in terms of the fan vote, but in terms of their overall weighted score, they both, placed second or third in each of those respective categories. So the conversation is between those 2 players. And the first point that I think a lot of people are making here in favor of Damian Lillard over Luka Doncic is their team's records. Portland is 18-10, they're 4th in the West, and the Mavs are a handful of games behind them in the Western Conference standings. And in a typical season, having that big of a disparity within the standings would be a much bigger deal than it is right now. We haven't played nearly as much of the year, nearly as many games to this point in the year at the time that All-Star starters are being revealed in comparison to previous years. So the standing stuff, in my opinion, doesn't matter as much as maybe it would typically in the past, simply because it's not as big of a sample size. And, one of these teams can have a good week or a bad week, and all of a sudden they're basically tied in the standings. So it's not a significant enough gap to really be a huge part of the calculation. If you want to give Dame a little bit more credit here because his team is playing better, because his team does have more wins, I think that's fine and that's fair. But I don't necessarily think it's even a big enough deal to make it like a tiebreaker type thing. Because like I said, next week the Mavs could win 3 or 4 games, and then the Blazers could lose a couple of games, and suddenly there's like a 1-game difference between those 2. So I hear what you're saying about the standings, but I don't think that's like a huge differentiating factor between these 2 players. And then of course you go and look at the statistics. And there's points in favor of either player here. Both are incredibly good scorers, of course. Luka's better as a playmaker and as a rebounder. Dame's a better 3-point shooter, and Luka shoots better from the field. So you just kind of go back and forth on all these different things. And the statistical argument is really difficult to differentiate these 2 players. And ultimately, it was pretty much a toss-up between those 2 guys. But I think the reason that not only I picked Luka and I got 9 out of the 10 All-Stars correct, the only one that I missed was I had Jaylen Brown as an Eastern Conference starter, and Kyrie was a starter, which is interesting because some people are trying to make the case that Kyrie shouldn't be on the team as a whole, and he ended up making it as a starter. But I think part of the thing here with Dame, as it specifically relates to Luka, but also those 5 players that I put in that MVP video yesterday, has a lot to do with narratives and excitement around a player. And whether that's fair or not, I don't know. But as it relates to All-Star stuff, MVP stuff, All-NBA stuff, that comes into play. Narratives come into play. The conversation around a player comes into play. And quite frankly, people take Damian Lillard for granted. And it's kind of a situation where he's just there. He's in Portland and he's doing his thing. He's rocking and rolling. He's playing incredibly well. And that is something that is just a given. Whereas Luka coming in last year in his second season, having an incredible year, and then this season following that up, being an international guy, gets people's attention. If we go specifically to the players I mentioned in the MVP video yesterday, all of them have, some kind of storyline around them. So Embiid is arguably having the best season in the league, took a significant jump from what he's shown in the past and has been healthy and has been awesome. LeBron is LeBron. There's always going to be a narrative around him. And now it's the fact that he's playing so well at his age and the fact the Lakers have one of the best records in the league. There's always going to be a narrative and a conversation around LeBron. Kevin Durant is having the most successful Achilles tear return of any player ever and is having an incredible season despite such a devastating injury on a new team, by the way, on the best offense in the entire league. So there's the narrative there. Jokic is the big man unicorn and is having an incredible statistical season and is such a unique player in terms of his play style and in terms of his skill set. That's going to get a lot of attention. Steph is coming back from, having a rough couple of, a rough year and being hurt, and has been on an incredible tear from an efficiency and a scoring standpoint lately. There's a lot of buzz around him, as evidenced by the fact that he was ones across the board in fan media as well as player vote for the All-Star voting stuff. And those are the 5 guys that I mentioned in that video. And when you compare those guys to Dame, it's not like statistically Dame doesn't have a case. It's not like he's not having an incredible season, because he is. But, and this is probably what a lot of Lillard fans get upset about, there's simply not a huge narrative around him. Dame has been a player that has been consistent for most of his career. Once he became a true star, he has just been him, and he's continued to improve and he's gotten better. He's been one of the best off the bounce 3-point shooters in the league. He's gotten better as a playmaker. He's gotten more efficient. But there's never been a season where, everybody's talking about Dame. There's never been this guy's leading the league in assists and points, like James Harden style, season from Dame. And the Blazers have always just been kind of there. They have a good record this year, but there are years when sometimes it's down. There are years when sometimes it's a little bit up, but they never go on a Utah Jazz type run where suddenly they're competing for the number 1 seed. Yes, they made a Western Conference Finals once, but that's kind of the explanation that I have for why he's not an all-star starter, is that sometimes it does just come down to the conversation. It comes down to excitement. It comes down to what are you bringing to the table from a headline standpoint, and maybe that shouldn't come into the equation when it comes to basketball. But at the end of the day, I think that's the simplest, the easiest explanation for why Damian Lillard was not named an all-star starter. Is there are, little, conversation points you can have between him and Luka about why one should have made it over the other, but ultimately, people just get more excited about Luka than they do Dame. And I know that Dame has a lot of fans of his game, and I'm one of them. I think Dame is an absolutely incredible player. But if you're looking for an explanation as to why exactly he was not an all-star starter, why he's not really in the MVP conversation, I think it's because of that. It's because, the big talking point for Dame is always the fact that he's never going to change teams, and he's going to stay in Portland, and he's going to do what he can to help win them a title. And the fact that, he's just there, like I said. And if you want to say that people are taking it for granted or whatever the case may be, I think that would be a good point. And ultimately, that's just where we're at with Dame. And at the end of the day, is it the end of the world that he didn't make the all-star starter team? No, he's going to be an all-star. And who knows, by the end of the season, maybe he is in the MVP conversation. He's probably going to make an all-NBA team. But I felt like when I was coming up with those all-star teams, I was kind of doubling between, what I thought, who I thought should have been making the team, but also trying to figure out who ultimately would make the team as starters, and of course his reserves as well. And it's tough to do that. Those are some tough conversations sometimes you have to have about specific players. And ultimately, I just felt like the kind of narrative around Luka kind of put him a little bit over the top of Dame. Whether you think that's the right thing or not is up to your own opinion, your own calculation. But that's basically why Dame isn't an all-star starter. And ultimately, knowing the kind of player that Dame is, he could come out and average 40 for the next 2 weeks just out of spite and just because he's upset because he feels like he's having a better season than Luka. He probably feels like he's having a better season than Steph. And I'm not saying that you couldn't make an argument there, because I think that you could, but we'll just keep an eye on this Portland team. We'll see what happens with them the rest of the year. Dame's going to make the All-Star team, and I'm really, really interested to see what happens with the reserves, because especially in the West with the guards, there's a ton of really, really good guards that are having awesome seasons that it's tough to kind of pick between. That's the case in both conferences. Really, there's a ton of talent on both sides. But once you get towards the end of the West reserves and you're looking at Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Mike Conley, you've got to deal with some of the other wild card guys like Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson. There's just a lot of different, De'Aaron Fox, SGA. There's a lot of different guys you can try and kind of make a case for, and who knows, maybe there'll be a lot of players named as all-stars because some of these guys might opt out, or we might not have the all-star game in general as a whole. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the best explanation I can give for why Dame was an all-star starter. So let me know down in the comment section below if you have an opinion on why you think Damian Lillard was not named as an all-star starter yesterday. And like I said, we'll keep an eye out for the next, I think it takes like 4 or 5 days for them to get all the votes back from the coaches for the reserves. And we'll of course be covering that, making a video on that when it comes out as well. But yeah, that is going to be the end of the first of today's videos. And I thank y'all very much for watching. If you're looking for another video from me today, I'll be talking about Giannis a little bit later and just making the case. I'm not saying this is my opinion, but making the case that Giannis made a mistake by staying with the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll just kind of talk about that in the second video today, so be on the lookout for that. But with all those things said, if you missed any of my previous videos and you enjoyed this one, you can check out the boxes on screen. You can check out the channel as a whole. As I said in the beginning, my name is Tucker. If you liked the video, leave a like rating. If you want to check out various socials that I have, you can check them out in the link tree down in the description below. With all those things said, hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.